Special welcome if you're watching on our YouTube channel or on onespotmedia.com. It's just a few hours more to go. The polls will be opened tomorrow morning. And we have been keeping you up to date for the last few weeks with what has been happening on the campaign trail. Now, the campaigning is over and the day is on the horizon. Now, we want you to get a feel of what's the expectation for the day. Speaking of expectations, our pollster Don Anderson shared his view on which seats may tip the balance.
The Jamaica Labour Party is heading into tomorrow's general election with polls showing a 12 percentage points lead over the People's National Party. Pollster Don Anderson says he's done some calculations based on voting patterns per constituency since 2002. He also assessed constituency and national polls conducted between last year and this year to arrive at this conclusion.
Based on those calculations, I have the 23 seats that the People's National Party currently hold that they are comfortable with and should retain all, if not most, if not all of them, 23. By extension, there are 28 seats that I believe the Jamaica Labour Party are comfortable in.
Nobody
that leaves 12 seats that are marginal and which could very well be, decided.
Any of you guys hearing me, Christina?
The election.
Hearing me?
Mr. Anderson says the 12 seats, which were all won by fewer than 1,000 votes last election, could push the JLP numbers significantly up or give the PNP a much better showing than the polls have been indicating. The seats include Hanover East, St. Mary South East, Clarendon South East, St. Catherine East Central, St. Catherine North East, St. Catherine South East, St. Anne Northwest, St. Anne Southwest, St. Elizabeth South East, Trelawney North, Clarendon North, and Clarendon Northwest. 5 of these seats are currently held by the People's National Party. The PNP won the St. James Southern seat by just 72 votes in 2016. It didn't make this list. The battle is between the JLP's Homer Davis and the PNP's Dr. Walton Small.
Based on work that we have done in that particular constituency over the last year, we anticipate that Homer Davis ought to win this particular seat for the simple reason that he's been very, very visible as mayor of Montego Bay over the last couple of years. And one suspects that the great visibility that he has had in the media was one sure way of indicating that he was going to be running again for the seat, which he was the one who lost by 72 votes last time to a very strong PNP candidate in Derek Kelly, who had held that seat for some 4 or so elections.
Mr. Anderson argues that this is an extremely unusual general election. He says there are a number of non-scientific factors that will play a role tomorrow.
Not the least of which is the COVID pandemic. We have no idea how that will pan out, whether they will come out to vote, how many of them will come out to vote, the impact of rain and COVID. So these are 2 major factors. And in the final analysis, a lot will depend on which of the 2 parties is able to mobilize their team on the ground.
About 30,000 people in quarantine and isolation will be allowed to vote in the general election on Thursday. It's not clear how many of them will actually go out and vote. These votes, Mr. Anderson argues, could impact the outcome of the election. Vashon Brown, TVJ News.
Now, adding their voice to the conversation are youth advocates Christina Williams and Saeed Bernard. And we also have Dwayne Haynes. Now, he's the president of the UWI Alumni Association. Ladies, gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, good. Now, you at home can also join the conversation by using the hashtag Decision2020JA. All right, Christina, I want to start with you. What's your assessment of the campaigns this election cycle?
Well, my assessment is they have tapped into, I guess, popular culture. They have utilized the dub plates, they have utilized the Clarks, they have utilized social media. I think they're really, as I said, they're playing into popular culture and they're trying to appeal as much as possible to the youth vote. So that's 1. 2, however, I am a little disappointed going into election day in terms of what both parties have delivered thus far. I felt I've gotten a lot more hype than substance for this election cycle. I, for one, am still with a lot of questions. I'm still very uncertain as to the timelines of some of these manifesto points and how feasible these manifesto points are, especially in a COVID climate, particularly in regards to funding these manifesto points. So I am a little disappointed, as I said before, and I'm a little concerned about the future of Jamaica, particularly the students that I represent and young people overall, because I'm yet to see very clear solutions in regards to some of the issues that are affecting the youth cohort. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to the results, and I hope that whoever wins tomorrow will lead in in an effective way. That's just my hope.
All right, Saeed, what about you? You're disappointed also?
I think they've tried. They've come up with some policies in their manifestos that are made to impact and be directed to the youth. But I have to agree with Christina as it relates to the substantiation and the fruition of those things. I believe that they were not engaged on a level where they were consulted. I don't believe that they were engaged on a level where, for instance, a big, huge thing that young people have been looking for is more than just a tweet to the Student Loan Bureau. Students want to know, what's going to happen when it comes to tuition. I've been saying this. And so this is one simple point where I believe that the young people, this generation, has not been sold on any point from either party as it relates to the tuition and university financing. As it relates to getting out to the youth, I think that both parties, they have been directing their efforts to that. The success of that, I guess, will show in the general election come tomorrow. But as much as I can say is the young people, they want to directly be a part of the process, but they aren't being given too much to buy into this process at this point in time.
All right, Dwayne, you might say you're disappointed too, but before you put your grade on it, do you think they were actually backed into this by everything that's happening, COVID and all the other issues that came up this year?
Definitely, Herman. I believe that given the change in conditions, a change in electoral processes, not just locally, but across the world due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic recession, which are facing a lot of countries now, the government as well as the opposition are backed in a corner as it relates to how do we navigate this whole electoral process, how do we campaign. They have done what they needed to do, which is to become more innovative, utilize the platforms which are available to them, try to meet persons where they are, meet the young persons via social media. You still have the everyday ads which are being put out via the different mass media outlets and so forth. I particularly like the whole transition from moving away from the still billboards, which are around Kingston and St. Andrew and around the island, to the more interactive billboards, the electronic ones in which you can, while at a stoplight, you can see their message coming across. But at the same time, I'm in agreement with Christina in the sense that the manifesto for me is not, for some aspects of the manifesto is not fiscally prudent then.
On both sides?
Not particularly on the JLP side, but more so on the People's National Party side. You have to wonder, okay, fine, you said that you want to assist persons who are finding it hard to combat and stay afloat in light of the whole COVID-19 pandemic and the economic effects associated with it. You want to give them $3,000 on the light bill and $1,000 on the water. But then later down you come on various media platforms and then you're saying that you want to pull resources from PATH, which are available for persons who are not in a financially sound position, persons who are less fortunate than. You want to pull resources from PATH to fund this. You want to pull resources from the Consolidator Fund. You want to pull resources from various means which are in place to protect the those persons who fall below the poverty line or those persons who are within a certain bracket. So it begs the question, is it that you're taking from Peter to pay Paul?
But cut the opposition some slack. Don't you think they They have been there, so they should know what they are doing in terms of, don't you trust them to say they know what they're doing?
I agree with you. Similarly, when the JLP came up with this 1.5, many persons were skeptical to say, how will you fund this? It's still left up for us to see whether or not at the end of tomorrow, when the polls close, if they will be successful. But at the same time, right now as it stands, I'm left wanting.
You have your questions and you need clarity.
Questions in terms of how will this be funded, in light of the fact that there's no one currently on the PNP side who is able to articulate those aspects in terms of the funding mechanism. One day you hear this, there's another day that you're hearing something else. So you keep trying to figure out, where do we stand as a people?
All right, final question to you, Dwayne. As I said, we're always on a sprint with this program. But who will win, and who do you think will win the election, and what would give them that advantage based on what we are seeing?
Based on what I'm seeing and based on the energy, and even though, yes, of course, elections are won on the day.
2020, the year of the most twists and turns, and we've got you covered. Decision
40, thereabout.
All right, Said?
As it relates to who will win, I think both parties have a good chance. Again, the strategy has been different. JLP has been going with a national swing through the Prime Minister, actually, Andrew Holness, versus the People's National Party, who they've been stepped on for most of the time. It reminds me of the 2016 general election, where the people slept on the Jamaica Labour Party. They came through. I'm also thinking of the fact that the strategy from the People's National Party, they have a good slate of members of Parliament and caretakers for these seats. And so I'm seeing where this election can actually go either way. What I'm willing to say, and that I will be clear, Herman, is that I don't believe that either party will win by more than 4 seats for this general election from tomorrow.
All right, you don't want to stick out and say one party or the other. The last one to you, Christina.
It can go either way, but I don't think more than 4 seats.
All right, Christina, who will win, and what do you think is their advantage?
I think the PNP, if it is that they're able to pull out their base, I've been reading a lot in terms of what the commentators would have said, as in the political commentators, in terms of what happened in the last election. And if the PNP is able to pull out their base in a way that they weren't able to do in the last general election, then they may have a chance. However, if rain intervenes and if COVID scares people, then and they're not able to pull out their base, or would have been able to re-energize their base before even now, then they definitely would not be in a good position tomorrow. And then I think that the JLP will definitely take it. What I'm really interested to see, though, is not even more about who wins, to be honest with you, but more about, I want to see the percentage of youth voter turnout tomorrow. Okay. That's really what I am here for.
All right,
and not just because I'm a young person, but particularly because both parties have been playing into the youth narrative, both through the utilization of social media and the different stunts that they have pulled, quote unquote. So I really want to see all of that fanfare would have really resulted in a higher voter turnout amongst
all right, we'll wait and see tomorrow.
Herman, I think this election
we're up on the break. Who is that, Said?
It's between 8 and 2 p.m. Yes.
All right, we're up on the break, so I really have to cut it there. Sorry about that. All right, thank you so much, Christina, Dwayne, and Said, for sharing with us here on Decision 2020. Now, please stay with us. When we come back, the JCF will be sharing with us their expectations for tomorrow. Please.
2020, the year of the most twists and turns, and we've got you covered. Decision 2020 COVID-style coverage. From the opening of the polls across Jamaica, our teams will bring you ballot-by-ballot coverage. We'll give you the latest voters count, spiced with our experienced analysts. Which party will form the next government? TVJ's Decision 2020, we've got you covered.
It's the big one.
We are going to create the new Jamaica.
This team is ready to rescue Jamaica.
2020, the year of the most twists and turns, and we've got you covered. Decision 2020 COVID-style coverage. From the opening of the polls across Jamaica, our teams will bring you ballot-by-ballot coverage. We'll give you the latest voters count, spiced with our experienced analysts. Which party will form the next government? TVJ's Decision 2020, we've got you covered.
Welcome back to Decision 2020. Now, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, JCF, this election has had its work cut out for it. As in addition to monitoring the enhanced security measures, they also have to enforce measures under the Disaster Risk Management Act because of COVID-19. I'm here to talk to us about how they have been managing those measures and what are the expectations for tomorrow is head of the JCF's Constabulary Communications Unit, Senior Superintendent Stephanie Lindsay. Stephanie Lindsay, welcome to Decision 2020.
Thank you.
All right, it's hours before the big day. How are things in place for your team for tomorrow?
Well, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, we are ready to execute come tomorrow.
All right, what special measures are in place for tomorrow?
Well, of course, you know that we have been doing pretty well in terms of election management for the last couple of elections that we have done. So we pretty much have a template that we just revise each time. However, this time around, we have an extra layer because we have COVID-19 protocols
right.
that we also have to be enforcing. So that within itself is hard work, and it is something that we have worked into our original plan. So we have deployed our members right across the island. We have put out additional members who would not normally be out working in core operational duties for elections. So as we are now, persons know what they are supposed to do. We have had several briefing sessions. And of course, we are working very closely with our military partners. So we believe that if persons come out tomorrow and abide by the rule of law, then we should have a good day.
All right, it's a interesting year to put it the least. COVID-19 itself is an issue. In terms of challenges that you have been facing, both through the campaigning period and now for election, walk us through some of those challenges and how you've been dealing with it.
Well, like this time around, we didn't have to do a lot of election campaigning coverage events because COVID would have restricted a lot of these activities that would have those road shows and those mass rallies. We never had those. Nonetheless, with COVID, we were out there, and then it was difficult at times to get people to just obey the measures that are out there in the Disaster Risk Management Act. So persons refuse to wear their masks. You still see the gathering where there ought not to be gatherings. So some of those were some of the challenges and some of the things that we observed during the period that they campaigned for. But for the most part, that went well. I think the biggest issue right now is to get people to comply with the Disaster Risk Management Act and to wear the mask. So that is something that we're going to be working very closely with the EOJ to ensure that persons, at least those within the polling stations and the close vicinity, that they at least ensure that whatever they do, they're protecting themselves and protecting others around them. So persons don't come to the polling station to exercise their franchise and end up being contaminated by someone who acts irresponsible. So it is something that we will be very vigilant about come tomorrow.
All right, we've seen the challenges in terms of masks and so on for persons who would have been campaigning, to use the word loosely, because they shouldn't really be out there. Supporters of the campaign, that is. Before I get to enforcement come tomorrow, what about your team? Do you have sufficient PPEs, masks, and whatever you would need to protect your team for tomorrow? Are you comfortable with what you have now?
I think we're pretty comfortable that we have sufficient for our members to be out there. We have PPEs, we have sanitizers, we have procured a number of items that would make our members safe, because you know by now that some of our members are too affected by COVID-19. So
right.
we are among the vulnerable groups ourselves, and I think the medical people are the most vulnerable because we have to be out there. Our job puts us where people are, so we can't refuse to interact with people because of the very nature of our job. So I think a lot has been done by the police leadership, the commissioner, the deputies, and all the other persons to ensure that members have what is necessary to carry out their functions effectively and safely.
In light of the number of persons within the force who have tested positive, have the other members been expressing concern about going out tomorrow?
I think members in general have expressed concern because, it's very contagious. We have had members testing positive. We have members because of their interaction with those individuals. They are members who are currently in quarantine based on the directive of the Ministry of Health. So no doubt our members will have concern about they themselves becoming affected by the illness. And so we have had several briefing sessions with them. We expect every single member of the force tomorrow to be wearing their mask. We expect them to have sanitizers in the vehicles that they are traveling. We expect them to have extra masks because these things were issued. So we are taking the necessary precaution to ensure that we are in a position to police effectively.
All right. I want you to contrast your expectations tomorrow with nomination day. Based on what you saw on nomination day, in terms of all parties coming together to let that day actually come to fruition. Contrast that with what you expect tomorrow and what lessons you'd have learned then and to correct tomorrow.
I think we anticipate that there will be a lot of persons out there who will not be obeying the rule of law. It's an expectation. So what we are prepared to do is that we are prepared to police effectively by prioritizing. So there are some things that we're going to be able to address because of the priority and because of the greater threat and the risk to society. So what we are expecting is that persons should not depend solely on the Jamaica Constabulary Force to ensure that we have a good day. I mean, we have had several meetings with candidates and persons closely associated with both parties so that they can talk to their constituents. They can speak to the individuals who are close to them to say, obey the rule of law. So we are expecting that based on what we saw on nomination day and the interaction and the discussions that we have had with the various leaders for both political parties in terms of the candidates, etc., that we are expecting that they would get their people to comply, but it is something that we're looking forward to see how it pans out tomorrow. But nonetheless, we are going out there to do what we can do and not what we know we can do as the Jamaica Constabulary Force for Good.
How rigid will you be in executing your duties tomorrow? I mean, you had that operation in Halfway Tree and other town centers. How rigid will you be tomorrow in terms of enforcement?
All right, so enforcement, you can't even predetermine how you're going to enforce because we enforce based on what we detect on the day. So it's all going to be what tomorrow will bring. We know what we're supposed to do. There are other areas that we'll be looking at. You have spirit lights, the premises that are supposed to be closed 1 hour before the opening of the poll and remain closed 6 hours after. So we know that there are times when persons want to be part of the celebration, so they think they should open for a while. So there are a lot of things, and of course there's election day, but then the other policing activities will still continue. So it will be a packed day for us. We know that we are very resilient as a force. We know that every time we have these events that we have to go beyond and above our normal functions. So I think we are all in the frame of mind. We understand what is asked of us and what we are supposed to do. And we are prepared both mentally, physically, and otherwise to carry out our functions tomorrow.
All right, good. In terms of persons coming out to vote who will be interacting with you, what message does the JCF have for them tomorrow?
All right, so we'd want to say to persons that we hope they have been paying attention to the various advisory that would have been sent out by the EOJ, by the Office of the Ombudsman, and from us. So we expect them to come out tomorrow. Expect to spend some time because of the process. There will be the sanitation regime. There will be persons will be asked to stand in line, and we expect them to maintain the distance. I know that the EOJ said that they are putting in measures at the various polling locations that can easily the person know where to stand and how to operate. So we will have a lot of those that we'll be working with. We know that we'll be working with the media. We know there are just 2 exemptions out there, as was told by us by EOJ. So all those persons we have been interacting with. So we expect that when people come tomorrow, one thing we want to ask everybody, wear a mask. Wear a mask. We know people will have all the excuses as to why they should not wear a mask, but we expect them to wear a mask because we don't know at this stage who are the persons who may be infected. And then if you don't wear a mask and the other person not wearing a mask, then the possibility exists that you could come in contact with the virus. Based on all the advice that we have been given by the expert, it say if you wear a mask, your chance of protecting yourself from others increases. So for their own personal safety, not to avoid prosecution. That should not be the reason. That should not be the motivation behind wearing the mask, but for your own self-protection.
Okay, good. All right, Senior Superintendent Stephanie Lindsay, thank you so much for being with us here on Decision 2020, and have a good day, your entire team, tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
All right, good. And that's where we put a wrap on Decision 2020 for this evening. Happy to have been with you for the last few weeks leading up to the polls. Now, as the action begins tomorrow at 7 a.m., TVJ News will have you covered with seat-by-seat action on all our platforms. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Herman Green. Be safe and pleasant viewing.
2020, the year of the most twists and turns, and we've got you covered. Decision 2020 COVID-style coverage. From the opening of the polls across Jamaica, our teams will bring you ballot-by-ballot coverage. We'll give you the latest voters' count, spiced with our experienced analysts. Which party will form the next government? TVJ's Decision 2020, we've got you covered.
It's the big one.
We are going to create the new Jamaica.
This team is ready to rescue Jamaica.
2020, the year of the most twists and turns, and we've got you